again, my name is Father John Hughes, and I want to welcome you back to our video series about the 4 fundamental directions in the spirituality of the work of the holy angels. In the last conferences, we've been talking about the first fundamental direction of adoration. And this will be the last conference with regard to adoration. In this conference, we want to talk about living in the presence of God. And this has to do with adoration because it's how we can adore God unceasingly. Of course, the definition of adoring God is a very broad definition. But one of the principal aspects of it is simply giving oneself to God. And so we give ourselves to God by being with God and serving God. And so living in the presence of God is about both of those things, serving God and being with God. And so the definition of being in the presence of God is a loving, continuous awareness of God's presence in our soul, connected to uniting ourselves, we're connected to the intention of uniting our will with His in all things, in our thoughts, in our words, and our deeds, and uniting our will with His for His glory. We could say for His good pleasure. And so we can see then in this definition how it would be a complete giving of oneself over to God. So that raises the question, how can we achieve this union with God? How can we develop, how can we cultivate this living in the presence of God? Well, there's 2 principal ways. The first is that of spiritual reading, and then the second is being in the present moment. Now, why is spiritual reading so important? Because spiritual reading is what's going to transform our minds. Spiritual reading is what's going to fill our thoughts, fill our minds and our thoughts with the things of God. I have an example of this. In the United States, I saw where it was said that men 80% of the time are thinking about sex. Now this is a laughable statistic, and it's not so much an indictment on the nature of man, masculine sexuality. It's an indictment against the culture of the United States. And the reason for that is because if men are thinking about sex, or a good majority of men are thinking about sex 80% of the time, then that's because they're watching sexually explicit materials, they're reading sexually explicit material, they're watching videos, and because of this is what's being fed into their minds, and so this is what's constantly being thought about. But if we change what we read, if we change what we listen to, if we change what we view on TV or on videos, then we can transform what's going on in our mind. And so that's why spiritual reading is so important. And so what are some of the things that we should be reading? Well, we could read, obviously, the Bible, sacred scripture. That's the first thing. And then second thing would be good spiritual books. Now, with regard to sacred scripture, many or some people might think to themselves, well, scripture is pretty difficult to understand. I don't know very much about it. And to that end, I would like to recommend a website that's put out by Dr. Scott Hahn. I think it's St. Paul's Biblical Center. But if you just go to Google and type in St. Paul Bible Studies, it'll take you right to it, and you can just click on that, and they have some very beautiful material that'll teach you how to go through the Bible And it's very informative in itself in how to understand many parts of the Bible. It's both written lessons as well as audio lessons. It's well worth your while to take a look at that. It'll be very helpful in learning how to read sacred scripture. The second thing that I'd like to talk about that will help us to attain to this living in the presence of God is being in the present moment. And by being in the present moment, we just simply want to avoid worrying about the past, maybe worrying about past sins. We want to avoid worrying about future uncertainties. We just want to be in the present moment, because that's where we're going to find God. That's where we're going to be able to be with God. Now, another thing that we want to avoid is daydreaming. We can very easily have fantasies that are enjoyable about being a big music star, or maybe a sports star. And what it really shows is an attachment of our heart, an over-attachment, an inordinate attachment. And we want to avoid these things, because we want to, when we recognize, we think about these things, we want to turn away from them and think about something else. It might be a little bit difficult at first, but I'd like to give the example of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who discovered in the early stages of his spiritual development of the difference between thinking of spiritual things and thinking of worldly things. And he would often like to, in his past life, he often liked to imagine himself as some chivalrous knight, and thinking of the glory that he could attain for himself in doing these things, and it would be very delightful. And then at other times, he would think about doing great things for God, serving God, being another Saint Francis of Assisi or Saint Dominic. And this also would fill his soul with delight. But he noticed one major difference between the two. When he stopped thinking about the fantasies of worldly glory, afterwards he felt dry, a little depressed, desolate. Whereas after he stopped thinking about serving God, he had peace. He had peace in his heart, tranquility. When we fill our minds with spiritual things, then we find that we just simply have a greater peace. So how do we practice being in the present moment? Okay, well, let's just give a brief discussion on it. Basically, again, as I said before, we want to be in the present moment. If we're working on something, we want to concentrate on our work. And we want to avoid worrying about the past, worrying about the future, daydreaming about worldly glories, things like that. And then we want to sanctify the present moment by a union of our wills. And we want to do this as frequently as we feel it's necessary to do. However, with regard to that, it might be the case if we don't have the habit of sanctifying the present moment, we might maybe want to try to do it every hour. Just make a quick spiritual communion to sanctify the present moment, uniting our will with God's in the present moment. Along with this, then, to sanctify the present moment, we want to, at the end of the day, examine ourselves. We want to see where we are weakening. Where do we have inordinate attachments? We want to examine the interior and exterior state of our soul. But the biggest thing that we want to do in order to develop this living in the presence of God is that we want to have a love for our own nothingness. We want to have a love for our own nothingness and have a complete confidence in the power of Jesus. Now, when we try to live in the presence of God in the beginning, we obviously can expect to be assailed by temptations to daydream, maybe even temptations from the evil one. And that's something that's not to worry about. We just resist them. But we don't want to be disquieted from any kind of temptation. We just put it aside and keep focusing on what we're supposed to be working on, or if we're at recreation, what we're doing with our brothers and sisters, or whatever the case, our friends. We just want to simply be in the present moment. And so if we don't want to be disquieted by any interior form of temptation, and we also don't want to let ourselves be disquieted by exterior temptations. We might be agitated with someone we know, an associate, a friend, a relative. We don't want to be judging of our neighbor. And again, if we yield to disquiet of this sort, then what we want to do is just calmly say we're sorry to God for time well spent and turn back to God. And then, when our peace returns, we can just kind of think of these faults, and we can humble ourselves before Jesus and just say, Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner. And then, of course, when we can examine these past faults too, and just for the sake of trying to figure out how we could have avoided falling. For instance, if we lost our temper with someone, maybe we can kind of think, okay, I know I'm going to meet up with this person at this particular place, at this particular time. I know I'm going to have to be on my guard to be very patient with this person. So we can examine how we could have avoided falling, and then we want to acknowledge our misery and put our trust completely in Jesus, because we want to depend on God for all things and give the glory to God for all things. And lastly, we don't want to examine how hard or easy something is. We just want to do it for the love of God. So this is our brief discussion of living in the presence of God. Kind of a very, very brief overview of what we can do to attain to an ever-growing intimacy and living with God by spiritual reading, so that we can feed our mind with good things, and then also by living in the present moment. I want to thank you once again for your time and attention, and God bless you.